I'm Dave from BoyInABand.com, and welcome to the final day of my 7-day song on Dance Pop, courtesy of Propellerhead Software's Music Making Month. Yesterday in day 6 we discussed the arrangement of the song, along with the melodies I've used, and today let's finish off the song with mixing and mastering. A lot of this will be the same info as previous 7-day song tutorials, but there are some dance pop specific things I'll mention. So, when you're mixing, try to mix on a pair of flat response speakers if you can, since overly bassy hi-fi systems or regular old PC speakers will end up giving a false representation of the sound, and it makes sense that if you can't hear all the frequencies, you're prone to mix things a bit dodgily. If you don't have speakers you're used to that give a decent all-round representation of the frequency spectrum, then make sure you test your mix out on a few systems, in headphones, on the car stereo, out of a giant audio-based weapon used to terrify the populace in a backwards country, just to see if the track is nice wherever you hear it. You don't want to have a good mix in your car and a bad-sounding mix when the insurgents are running in fear for their lives. The beat and the bass are, as per usual, generally loudest instrumentally. The vocals in pop music, however, are difficult to gauge, especially after working on a track for a long time, but they should be a similar volume to the beat, perhaps a little bit lower, depending on the power of the voice of the vocalist. And here, I've got the mixer running into a mastering suite, 2 mastering suites, then finally into a channel here in Record's inbuilt mixer. And about those vocals, make sure you apply enough reverb. I've used the send effect here, number 1. You want enough reverb to make it sit in the mix, but not so much that you can really hear it. Then just make sure those double tracks, like we've got the L and R for the chorus, and the pre-chorus has its own double track, should be down a little bit. Just sitting behind the lead vocal, just thickening it up. The effects can be a bit awkward if we go back to them. Since reverses need to be nice and loud, but you don't want the cymbals swamping the track, for instance, so feel free to change some levels in the mixer within the effects combinator. Here I had to bring down the volume quite a bit of the effect that had been bit crushed, because it's very loud after the effect had been applied. The other thing to think about is stereo space. If you have 2 sounds that live in a similar frequency, try widening one so it's able to sit in the mix either side of the other sound. You can do this with chorus, like we did in the bass synth, or you can just pan it. I also added a stereo imager as a send effect, number 3 here, which I've applied healthily to the mixer. And this is a cool mastering technique to make everything feel a little bit bigger. So that's the mix. Best thing to do is to give it a few days after you've mixed it, come back and mix it again at a point where you aren't about to collapse from mental exhaustion after getting frustrated at your kick drum treading the line between awesome power and flabbiness for the millionth time. And then it's time for mastering. Now, as you can see, I've got 2 different mastering suites, an extra one than I had at the start, one of which is on 4-band parallel compression, which is brilliant for bringing up the overall level of 4 different frequency bands, but it can result in the track sounding overcompressed and flat if you're not careful, so apply it sparingly. Then the other one, I put on the dance preset, which gives us, if we look in, a compressor, EQ, a stereo imager, which is turned off at the moment, and a maximizer. But I've made a little change that I think improves it. I've turned the limiter, made sure the attack is on slow, so the initial hits are allowed through before they're limited down, and then the soft clip is on full, just so those punchy bits I mentioned get tamed with some warm distortion, so they don't end up clipping. I found this was quite a nice method of volume boosting. And the top 4 params here, maximizer is up a little bit, but the compression I've brought down, since I compress the crap out of the instruments individually anyway. Now, if you're worried about the lack of dynamic range when you're mixing, i.e. the punchiness of the kick drum, don't have the master gain so high. The song will be quieter, but when you boost the volume of the system to a comparable volume, it'll feel 10 times punchier. Unfortunately, since you aren't God or the Flying Spaghetti Monster, it isn't possible to visit the houses of every DJ in the world and request that they make your track much louder than the rest. You might have to sacrifice this dynamic range for the volume to compete with the volumes of other tracks in clubs. Then, once everything's finished, take a listen to it side by side with a similar song of your choice to see whether it's hitting the right kinds of volumes, frequencies, and that it's sounding as pro as you can make it. Don't keep worrying about one song though. If it's not working, move on to a new song. You will only demoralize yourself if you obsess over individual tracks for too long. You have to learn when to stop and try another track, since you'll probably learn a lot more about production in your next awesome song than you would about agonizing over the mix of this one. Now, Record 1.5 also has some cool bits for mastering. If we scroll up here, we can see it's got this master compressor, which I've run everything through. And this really helped to glue the vocals together with the instrumental since I did the 2 kind of separately. I've turned on Record's compressor and got a medium kind of threshold and ratio, 4:1 ratio there. A reasonable attack, so it does punch through, but the release is quite low, so it brings everything up quite quickly. And only about 1 or 2 decibels of makeup gain, since we already did a lot of compression on the instrumental. But as I said, this just helps tie the vocals into the instrumental a bit. And that's about it for the mix and master. Tune in for part 2 where I'll be playing the final song.